I'd like to call this meeting to order. We're having a public hearing over ordinance number 20-11-09. It's an ordinance to amend the official zoning map of Gordonsville, Tennessee. Said amendment rezones 117.02 acres of property located at 149 Baker Lane from I-1 light industrial to I-2 heavy industrial. Do we have any comments at this time? I would like to introduce Mayor Mason. He's here, and if he could introduce Mr. Don.
Mr. Don McCoy and his wife Carter are here. He is part of the group coming to looking to purchase the property. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
We'll open the floor at this time. If there are no comments.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
May I just say something?
Yes, sir.
On behalf. I'm Bill Woodard with the Smith County Chamber of Commerce, and I'd just like to say, you guys are very generous, all three of the cities and the county, in allowing us at the Chamber of Commerce to do some of the work that we do for you. And part of that is to try to recruit industry. We have a gentleman named Dan Tidcombe, and the mayor maybe have to help me with everybody else that's involved, but he works with the Tennessee Central Authority, and what the job is to try to bring industry into the county, and what the job that we're trying to do is make things better around here for everybody. And what makes things better is if we can have good, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens and industry that doesn't pollute and brings jobs to us, and it brings higher paying jobs. You know, we have a lot of people in this county that work for wages that are not as high as we'd like them to be. And when we can bring an industry in that can bring wages in that is going to up that level, then I think that's a good thing, and that's what you guys ask us to do, and that's what we do. We've had several meetings here right in this room where we've brought people in and talked to them about bringing factories in. One recent meeting we had over at the Chamber of Commerce, had a meeting over there with Metalex, and they're coming in and they're going to be a support structure for Bonnell Aluminum, and they're bringing more industry and some higher paying jobs in. So I want to thank you guys for your support. And I'd like to say that we at the Chamber of Commerce would like to see these folks come in because it's bringing another diversity to what we have. We're in automotive and packaging now. This will put us in pharmaceuticals and in some of the DOD, Department of Defense tier. And I think that'd be good for us to have that diversity here in the county.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Can we hear what he's proposing, the factories and the businesses that he's wanting to bring?
Yes, I would say that we do have several meetings tonight, so if it could be something brief.
So right now the plan is to bring 3 businesses into the industrial park on the Baker property. The first will be a primer company that is manufacturing boxer primers for small arms ammunition. The second is a big tank fermentation operation aimed at making antibiotics specifically for the DOD, the largest purchaser of antibiotics in the United States. And the last is a dielectric capacitor line, which is a component to high-end electronics, avionics, and sensor equipment that is currently being made in a factory in New Jersey. We are also doing a feasibility study looking at a clean energy operation making biodiesel out of soybean oil. But that is really in its infancy. Everything else we are ready to move forward on. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
What environmental concerns would be associated with any of those industries. That's my concern is, is if we rezone this, I'd like to know what, because it's going to be in my backyard.
Of course. So the first environmental concern, and the one that I think has used to have the biggest impact, is antibiotic production. So if you're making antibiotics, your wastewater usually produces, the process usually has wastewater that produces estrogen mimickers, which is a lot of the reason why all these moved overseas. My partner, his background prior to starting his dielectric capacitor, he had an electric capacitor company, was in the clean water processes for large industry. And we are going to use a filtration system that removes the estrogen mimickers from the process. That's the most potentially environmentally harmful aspect of everything we're doing. But conversely, it's also the one that I think is most important to us as Americans. Because right now, if you take antibiotics, you're taking something that's made in the People's Republic of China. Period. There's no antibiotic production right now in the United States. That's a problem if we go to war with the Chinese. I think it's a problem, period, because I think we should have the capacity to make our own drugs. But I think it's a big problem if we go to war with the Chinese. The other two processes are going to be largely the light industrial processes. The primer company is largely a die and press operation, making something that's been made in America since 1869. The problem there is it has a lead component, and that lead component is mixed with another component called styptic acid, which makes it explosive. I have an extensive background in dealing with explosives, usually bigger booms than styptic acid, but I have a healthy respect for anything that goes boom. So when we were doing all of our studies on this industrial process, we looked at the industrial line that we're looking to go with has an armored component where the styptic acid is actually used, so if there was any accident in that component, it contains the explosion. And we're looking at using everything from armored dollies to armored storage facilities for everything. The armor being such that it would contain any internal explosion inside. But it's lead.
So any chance of explosion will be contained at all times. Correct.
And none of these would be classified as high explosive. So whenever you're talking about explosives, one of the things you talk about is something called relative effectiveness. So the relative effectiveness is based on a scale based on TNT. So TNT's RE is 1. C4 is 1.3. This is like 0.4. So it's a relatively low explosive. The problem that you have with this is that most people don't want to deal with it because it's a pressure sensitive thing. And like any explosive, I mentioned this earlier, most of the times I've seen accidents with explosives is because of one of two things. Either somebody didn't have any idea what they were doing, or they didn't have the respect for the explosive. I have a respect for anything that goes boom, and we are going to use redundant safety and armored, even everything from an armored dolly to carry the limited amount that we can have on the factory floor at one time. We will even use an armored dolly that will contain the explosive inside it. But again, if there is a lead component to this, we're going to use filtration systems on the air and good industrial practices inside the factory. The biggest, if you ask me what I would say the biggest noticeable environmental impact is, it's not negative, would be while making antibiotics back in the 50s. Most places that made penicillin or any of the components for penicillinase and antibiotics, they would tell you that the people in the area sometimes would notice that the air smelled like peanut butter when the wind was right. But that's back in the time when we didn't use any air filtration systems in factories. We're going to install air filtration systems to minimize the smell and water filtration systems to remove all the estrogen mimickers. Once again, good industrial practices is how you mitigate most of this stuff. And for the dielectric capacitors, they don't even use lead in that process. So the problem that we have right now with TBT, the company that wants to bring the line here, TBT makes two products that are both components for high-end electronics, things that we don't want other people to make, like sonars and radars. And one uses lead, and the other has to be absolutely lead-free. So they're looking to move the lead-free process down. And they've taken out all the carcinogenic chemicals out of the process. Any other questions? Did I answer your question for you?
So you're gonna move the material on a dolly, right? What you said?
For like bringing stuff, bringing stuff onto the factory floor. You have an armored dolly.
What about the storage plates?
The storage plate is going to be inside what's called an RMAG. It's similar to a reinforced sealant container, and it was made for U.S. military EOD so that you could store the quantities of explosive that could be stored in it if they all detonated at once for a high effectiveness detonation would be contained within the explosion, the container. So if you look online at RMAG, they'll show you them setting off, they have a small RMAG that's about the size of that piano. They show one where they're setting off 200 pounds of C4 inside of it. And it doesn't rupture the outside of the building. It just vents it outside of the bottom.
In advance to the place? I guess they got a truck, I guess you had to truck it in, right?
It would be trucked in two separate components and mixed on site. So we would only have so much mixed at a time. The factory line only uses 5 pounds of it at one time.
And then for the, he spoke about jobs, what skill level will it take?
Everything from a master's degree in chemistry down to a high school education. We're going to be
You'll have range for?
We have ranges for all that, yes, sir. And we're looking to make, the reason we're looking to make these, once again, it's another overseas supply chain that right now is impacting ammo production in the United States. There's a shortage of primers. But it's a process, like I said, we've been making them in America since 1869.
Why do you want to move here?
Why? Well, number one, Tennessee is business friendly. You guys have a strong sense of community, a strong work ethic. And when my business partner was talking about moving to Tennessee as kind of a dream, my wife said, well, I have an uncle that lives in Tennessee. And so I called Bill, my wife's uncle, at the Chamber of Commerce. And I said to Bill, hey, I'm thinking about bringing some businesses to Tennessee, and we were maybe looking at your community. What do you think? And I had about 14 questions. I didn't have to answer any of them because Bill answered them all in the next conversation. And I moved here in September, and I thank God every day I moved to Tennessee.
So logistically, the facility, the site you're looking at is good and central? It's not out of the way? Or? I guess my concern would be is it comes in and then costs will always try to get pushed in, and that logistically you may find that it's not okay. So I just want to be sure.
You mean to make primers?
To make them ship them wherever they go.
So right now, an average price to make a primer is about a half cent a primer, being conservative. In our model, we estimated that it would cost 0.7 cents to make one primer. If you go online right now, the average price for a primer, say a small rifle primer for the 223 round, a dime. And what we're not looking to sell at that type of margin. We're looking to partner with some of the ammo manufacturers and make long-standing orders so that we're
and
producing.
Customer ship point where you ship to?
Right now, we're talking to people like in South Dakota, Black Hills, some people in Oregon, Nosler, and then Winchester and Federal as well. Sorry, that question and answer was a little organized.
That's great.
Is there anything else I can answer to anybody?
What are the pay ranges for the jobs?
Pay ranges for the jobs are I ran this by Tennessee Economic Development. We don't want to pay anybody less than $20 an hour, and we are providing full health care for everybody, for them and their families.
And the pharmaceuticals, will there be any smell associated with that?
There might be some smell. We are going to use, like I said, air filtration systems to scrub the air before we release it.
And how far will it travel even if it releases and there is smell?
That's going to be dependent on the wind and the day. I couldn't speak to that with any degree of accuracy. But we don't anticipate it being something that's going to be like a paper mill or a rendering plant for pork or chicken. We don't want to bring anything like that in here. It would be significantly less than that. but I couldn't tell you with any degree of accuracy what the smell will be. Smell, everything I had heard before, they said it smells like peanut butter.
You yourself have never done,
Antibiotics?
yeah,
No.
or primers.
No, I've never done primers. I spent the last 30 years in special operations. So that's all my use with primers and explosives were practical. Anybody else? I yield the floor, sir.
Any more questions before we?
Is all the plans that they want to bring, does all of them have to be rezoned? I mean, are they all considered that they have to be rezoned, every one of
What they're doing,
what they're proposing?
all that's before the council is to rezone it to I-2.
Right.
There are permitted uses in the I-2 that are fairly specific. What he's describing would have to qualify most likely as a special exception to I-2, which would be allowed. So your Board of Zoning Appeals would see that and have to sign off on the safety measures, the environmental measures, and everything that goes along with it before it got approved. If it fits within the permitted uses of I-2, which is heavy manufacturing such as the processing of primary metals, it's not that. Quarrying and mining of operations, it's not that. Sawmills and other uses of similar character, and then gasoline and oil storage above ground tanks. And that's pretty well it. That's all that's permitted. Now, what he's describing would seem to fall under the permissible uses on appeal, and that would require BZA approval before construction. So it wouldn't be necessarily an automatic. There would still be another layer of review before those can.
So if you rezone, you're not just opening the door if this does not come through. We're not just opening the door for any, you know.
The property being rezoned would allow as a permitted use processing facilities such as the processing of primary metals, quarrying and mining operations, which is nearby anyway, sawmills and other uses of similar character. The second category is gasoline and oil storage above ground, provided no storage tank or building shall be closer than 100 feet to the property line, and then any necessary use or buildings incidental to those, and essential utility services and facilities. That's all that's a permitted use in I-2. Now, there are several special exceptions under that requires another hearing and presentations and safety studies and professional reports and things of that nature. But that's all, if it's rezoned I-2, those permitted uses are what would come without any further review. Beyond that, you do have to come back to the Gordonsville Board of Zoning Appeals. So no, sir, to answer your question, it doesn't necessarily open the door, except to those few things I mentioned.
And then I'll hush, but my last thing is just to the council that I've taken into hoping that we've done our research as far as our own research. No disrespect to the gentleman speaking, but that we know that, I mean, I'm going to be moving closer to the industrial park, and I don't want to smell anything that doesn't smell like, you know, within reason that doesn't smell like it's supposed to smell, and be hindered with that, you know, the rest of my life. And it's not about me, but the community. And I'm worried. I don't want to rush judgment if we're not prepared, that we don't know for sure, that we've not looked at it across the country, you know, across in other countries that have these plants, to know that's going to be the case for sure.
Anyone else? Well, we'll adjourn this meeting. We will go right into